chapter 6. You know, the Bible, the psalmist David, he said, I will enter his courts with thanksgiving. I will enter his gates with thanksgiving. I will enter his courts with praise. You know, there's a lot of things, and I think one that may have spoken to you all a little bit on Wednesday night about worship and praise. But you know, there's a lot of things that are tied to our worship and to our praise. There's a lot of times we are seeking things from the Lord. And we're wondering sometimes why things are not how do I want to say it? Why things are not progressing, let me put it like that, in our lives. Why God is not moving in our lives. We're going to cover a lot of scripture, not necessarily all of it today. I know good well I can't get through it all today. But there is a purpose for our praise. There is a purpose for our worship. In the 6th chapter of the book of Samuel, we find where David had went out to get the ark. Now I want you to bring the ark of the covenant back into Jerusalem. But I want you to get the significance of the ark here, if you will. David was not looking to go get the box. He was not looking to go get what the mercy seat, the cherubims, the box that was built, what was in the box, the manna, the rod that budded, and the Ten Commandments, the 2 tablets that contain the 10 Commandments. What he was after is what abode above the mercy seat between the cherubims. What he was after was the presence of God, is what he was after. What David was looking for, and what I've done with this is everywhere that the word ark is used, as I was reading it, I substituted the presence of God. Because that's what David was after. You see, there's a lot of people that are satisfied with the presence of God just once a week, or twice a week, or 3 times a week. There's a lot of people that think, we just feel, the presence, just when we come to church or something of that nature. But you see, David was he was a man that wanted the presence of God 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When David messed up, when David sinned, and the punishment that he was looking to come from God, the one thing in the Psalms that he reiterated and stated real clearly is, Lord, don't take your presence, your spirit, don't take your presence from me. Don't take your presence from me. There's a lot of times that we are looking for God to show up. We're looking for the presence to show up and to be real and manifested and tangible in our lives. And I'm here today to tell you that is a place that I want to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't just want to be that way just at a certain period of time. And there is a way in which we can get there. I want you to notice something as we go through here. There's 2 different, this is a great big story, and I'm not going to get in no hurry with it here this morning. Begins way back before here when the Philistines came and took the ark. Now I want you to notice when the presence, because the ark, when the Philistines, when they took the ark, whenever they took the ark from the children of Israel, there was something that was going on. And last week, and we've been dealing with some things, and last week we talked about, some of the things that are in our lives that shouldn't be there. We talked about that, and I don't want you to ever forget that. I don't want you to forget that, because I want you to look at something, and by the time I'm finished, we'll probably get to all of it. I just don't know how long it's going to take me. But notice when the ark, or the presence of God, was taken from Israel. Now, the ark was stolen. The ark was in Israel. They brought the ark out to the battle. You all remember the story. They were battling and they were losing. And they went and they got the ark of the covenant, the presence of God, and ushered the presence of God into the battle. But they still lost. And the Ark of the Covenant was stolen. There's a reason for that. You know, the presence of God can be present. The presence of God can be in our midst. The Ark represented the presence of God. God never left the mercy seat. Whenever they brought the ark, that was the place where God abode. The presence of God was at that particular time. His place was above the mercy seat between the cherubims. Wherever the ark went, the presence of God went. So they showed up in battle with the presence of God with them. Whenever they brought the presence of God to the battle, the children of Israel shouted with a great shout. So much so that the ground shook. But they still lost. They still, see, a lot of times we don't catch things. We don't reach and get it. We don't get the presence of God was still there. You see, there's times in our lives that because the presence of God, he said, I'll never leave you and I'll never forsake you. The presence of God is in us. The presence of God is with us. But there's sometimes it just don't seem like he's working, or something is not being brought forth, and he's not manifesting. You know why the presence of God was not working? You know why the presence of God was rendered? You see, the presence of God is the presence of God. I mean, he's capable, he's able, but there comes times in our lives whenever things can happen and short circuit and nullify the presence of God and being able to work in my life. You say that can't happen. Well, it did in the children of Israel. Because when they, again, I'm going to say it again, when they brought the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God was still. How do you know the presence of God was there? Preacher, well, I'll tell you how I know. Because whenever they took the ark and put it in the house of Dagon, who fell? Dagon fell. Why did Dagon fall? Because the presence of God was in the place. They set Dagon back up. They come back the next morning and Dagon fell down again, and his head was gone and his hand, all that was left was a stump. Why? Because the presence of God was still there. Well, if the presence of God, the same presence of God that shoved Dagon over in the house of Dagon, in that temple of Dagon, the same presence of God that did that was still on the mercy seat whenever they were in the war, whenever they were battling. But what happened? The priest, you remember Eli? He had two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and they were laying with the women that were working at the door of the temple, and they were robbing people of their sacrifice and stealing the people's sacrifice whenever it come in. You remember all of that was going on? And because it wasn't dealt with, because Eli didn't deal with it, you remember God said your two sons, they're going to die because you have not dealt with this thing like you should. Your two sons are going to die. You remember all of that? That story that we read of and we know about? All of that stuff that the priests were doing. Hello, priest. Hello, priest. All of that stuff that the priests were doing was not pleasing to God. Now understand, please understand, God was still there. He still called them his people. He never turned his back on his people, but he could not work for them. I know that's all, preacher, that's all Old Testament. We'll get New Testament. We'll get New Testament. Oh, this thing is real. You see, this is where we are. Let me tell you, in order to host the presence of God, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say this and I'm going to show you in a minute. In order to host the presence of God, if we want to see the presence of God, I get it, the presence of God is in us. But if we want to see the trueness of the presence of God, there's something, let me put it like this, I don't say things, there's something that we need to do before the presence of God. Mm-hmm. There's something that goes before the presence of God. The presence of God was in the midst of that battle. I'll say it again, but the children of Israel lost the battle. The ark was taken. The miraculous wonders and movements of God, whenever the ark was in the hands of the enemy, was still prevalent. Dagon, the things that happened to the men of those cities that they sent the ark to, and the things that were going, it was God's presence, it was God's movement, it was God moving in those areas. David became king. It was David's desire, because he desired the presence of God. You see, we say we desire the presence of God, but do we truly? Do we truly? You see, in the presence of God, there's fullness of joy. In the presence of God, there's healing forevermore. In the presence of God, there's everything that we need in his presence. David was a man that hungered for the presence of God. We can read, and we will read through the Psalms as we go in several of the Psalms. But through the Psalms, you can see David's heart as he reaches for the things of God. I mean, he says in one place, he says, you know, my heart pants after you like a deer pants for the water brook. My soul longeth after thee. My soul, my life, all that I am, I long after you. I seek after you. I search after you. I want you, Lord. I want you. I want you. I want you. See, there's a lot of times we want God, and I'm going to say we want God. We wonder how we are going to get, how do we get more of God? How do we get more and more of God? How do we get what we truly want, or what we say we want? Whenever we truly want something, we do what we need to do to get it. Amen? Amen. If there's something that we desire, if there's a thing that we want and we want it bad enough, we will do whatever we need to do to get it. If there's something in this natural world that we want bad enough, we will do what we need to do to get it. Even if it's go borrow money to get it, we will do whatever we need to do. If it's work more hours, it don't matter. And whatever, if I have to do without something in order to get this, I'll do whatever I need to do if I really want it. You see, David was willing to do some things for that he wanted. David decided that, okay, we're going to go get the ark. We know where it's at. We're going to go get it. I want the presence of God back in the city of David. I want the presence of God back in Jerusalem. I want to be able to go and to reside in the presence of God. I want the ark, which represents the presence. I want it back here because my desire is to spend time in the presence of God. That's what I want to do. Well, preacher, I wish we would have church more and more and more so we can spend time in the presence of God. I'm going to take you to a place and I'm going to show you that we don't just have to do it in church. Now, don't think that you don't, now please don't think that and say, well, the preacher said we ain't got to go to church. No, because I'll show you in a minute. Woo! Or tomorrow or next week or sometime. I didn't say that now. The Bible says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together in the last days. So there's a reason for that, and I'll show you before it's all over. But David was going to do some things, so he says, okay, let's go get the ark. Now, David didn't study, he didn't do things, he didn't go back and get a hold of everything that he was supposed to do. We know that he went out and he done it, and he done it wrong. He took a new cart and went and got the Ark of the Covenant. And now he's coming back with the Ark of the Covenant, and I want you to notice something. The second time he's coming back with the Ark of the Covenant, you know, they're praising and they're playing songs, and they're singing and they're shouting, and David's dancing. They're worshiping the Lord. Well, that same thing happened the first time that he went and got the ark. It says that it did, as you read, and I'm not going to look all down through it. They brought the Ark of the Covenant. They brought in verse 4 of chapter 6. It says they brought the Ark of the Covenant of God, or the presence of God. They brought the presence of God from the house of Abinadab on the hill in Ahoah, whatever his name is, was walking in front of the ark. Meanwhile, David and the entire house of Israel was celebrating before the Lord, or before the presence of God, with all sorts of instruments made of fir wood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. They were worshiping, they were praising the Lord. But something happened. Watch this now. Something happened. As they come across the threshing floor, they hit, one of the oxen stumbled, and there was a man, watch this now, a man that reached out to control, or to control the movement of the presence of God. He reached out to control, and yeah, we can say, well, he was trying to keep it from falling. What was he doing? He was trying to control the movement. He reached out and touched the flesh. Watch this now. This is the reason people don't want to get in the true presence of God too much, is because whenever the flesh comes in contact with the presence of God, flesh dies. Amen. It's just that simple. Uzziah, the flesh, the man, reached out to study the ark. He reached out to control the movement of the ark. He would have been better off to let God did what God done and let it go. But no, he had to reach out and touch it. And whenever the flesh comes in contact with the presence of God, flesh dies. Now watch this now. It's no different. The Old Testament is types and shadows of things to come. Okay? It's always been, ever since in the Old Testament, whenever the Ark of the Covenant was there in the temple, whenever it was in the Holy of Holies, flesh had to be dealt with. Offerings for sin had to be dealt with in order for the priest, the high priest, to come into the Holy of Holies one time a year, and he offered a blood sacrifice for the whole nation one time a year. And whenever he come in, he had to be right. He had to be prepared. His things had to be gotten under the blood at that particular time. He had to be, all of the sins for him, he had to already have offered a sacrifice for himself and be cleaned up in order to come into the presence of God. They tied a rope around his leg just in case he was lying about it, and they had bells on his robe, and he was in there always moving so that the bells would be jingling, and if the bells stopped jingling, they didn't go get him, they just pulled him out with a rope. Why? Because when flesh When flesh comes in contact, whenever flesh that is contaminated comes in contact with the presence of God, flesh dies. Well, preacher, if I could just get my flesh under control, everything would be all right. You know, I have a lot of problems with my flesh. I tell you a fix for the flesh: get in the presence of God. Flesh dies when it comes in the presence of God. The only time I have trouble with my flesh is whenever I'm not in God's presence. Oh, the devil wants to tempt me. You know, let no man say he's tempted of God. Because God can tempt no man with evil. But man is tempted when he's drawn away by his own lust. Drawn away from what? From the presence of God. Drawn away from the presence of God. Why? Because as long as I'm in the presence of God, flesh, come on somebody, which is the only thing that can be tempted, flesh, as long as I'm in the presence of God, flesh is dead. Well, preacher, I sure have a lot of problem with my flesh. I'm not preaching this. I'm not going over this, teaching this to bring condemnation to anybody. I'm doing this to help us grow in the things of God. Amen? Amen. I'm doing this to help us grow so that God can do what God wants to do. Amen? In our lives. Amen? You see, there's a lot of people that wonder why I'm not delivered. Why I have not been delivered. Why can't I get delivered from this? There's a lot of people that are there. The reason that we can't get delivered from that is because we're not in the presence of God. Come on, because in the presence of God, there's deliverance evermore. Come on. When I wish I could stay in the presence of God every day, that's not a problem. Well, that ain't what everybody else says. I'm not everybody else. We can stay. It is our choice as to whether we stay in the presence of God or not. It is our choice as to whether we operate in the presence of God or not. Whenever Uzzah reached out and touched the ark and he died, David, he got afraid. He was fearful and he redirected the ark. You notice the Bible, I'm reading it here, he redirected the ark. He sent it to the house of Obed-Edom. I mean, after all, if somebody else is going to die, it don't need to be me. Come on. I mean, that's good enough for somebody else, but come on. I mean, David's a man, and I'm not picking on David. David's a man after God's own heart. I say that because, there's sometimes, we kind of get that way, let somebody else do that, it's somebody else, But listen, anytime we come into the presence of God, there's a part of this flesh that's going to give up. We just think there's nothing that this flesh can do. Whenever Moses wanted to see, Moses went on Mount Sinai. He wanted to see God. He wanted to see the presence of God. He wanted to, the word present. Now watch this, please. The word present, and I don't know if it's been covered yet or not on Wednesday night because I haven't been here, but on the word presence in the Hebrew, in the Old Testament, literally means the face of God. So whenever you hear them talking about, I want to be in the presence of God, or I want the presence of God in the Hebrew, in the Old Testament, it means I want to see Him face to face. That's what Moses wanted whenever he was on Mount Sinai. But there had not been a provision made for that to happen. And God told Moses, there's no man that has seen my face that has lived. That's still true today. However, we can see the face of God after we have become born again, because the Spirit that raised Him from the dead is now bringing life to our mortal bodies. And we can see Him face to face. There's people that think that can't happen, but we can visit Him face to face in His presence. We can get there. You see, back in the Old Testament, Moses, he could not see anything. God wouldn't let him see anything but his hinder parts. His goodness passed before him. Why? Because when we see the face of God, we see the goodness of God. And in the goodness of God, unrighteousness can't stand. I'm going to try to stay as unexcited as I can. The reason, I'm going to say this again and then I'm going to move on. The reason that the presence of God, the Ark of the Covenant, whenever the children of Israel brought it into that battle, the reason that it was unproductive was because of what the priest had been doing.